the maximum time of 50 minutes per item unless otherwise extended. Do we have any public comments concerning items on the agenda? Seeing none, public comments concerning items not on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll move on to our board and executive staff reports. Any board member reports? I'm hoping we'll have a few from our session yesterday. Someone
Monday.
like to-
That was Monday.
Yeah, or Monday, sorry.
Real interested in hearing your summary.
I guess I forgot to poll the board to see if somebody was going to give us a summary on our workshop. Earl, would you like to? I'll do a few comments. But
No.
no? Okay.
I came in
You
late.
came in late. You had a little jet lag. That's right. That wouldn't be very fair.
I have an excuse.
Well, I thought it was a great workshop. I'll summarize, but if somebody would like to give another.
I
board
thought it was very valuable. You got a chance to see how the accreditation board thinks. And I think the real important part was the last half. And while they didn't criticize the board directly, they did it indirectly. And they were trying to get across to us that it is our job to hold the college accountable on student success issues. And student success then also includes making sure that we actually have real data to enable us to judge as opposed to just narrative. And it's our job to make sure that various segments of the college actually do what they say they do, and to actually not be involved so much in reviewing programs, but to make sure that data is there so that we can judge whether what is being told is really valid. Is a program working? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it a lost cause based on real data? They made it real clear that it was our job to hold the college accountable. And they said that 6 or 7 ways, a couple of times each. And I got that drift, and I look forward to college run by policy and data as opposed to being driven by personalities. That's what I got out of it.
No, I agree. I actually got out of it exactly what I wanted, and I shared this with Stan. You know, as a board member, and I'm speaking for myself, but I believe I will be speaking on a whole for everybody, is I guess I wanted to make certain that I knew what our role and accountability was in our show cause, and to take it for what it was worth and know what our accountability was, and not point fingers or not say, gee, I can't believe that didn't get done. Well, what did we miss? And I think she was very clear on what we could have done and showed us how to, you know, what to watch for and our role and what has happened. So I was real happy with that. I was also greatly pleased with everybody that showed up, because it was just for the board. So to all of you that were there, we appreciate that, because now we know that you know what our role is, and hopefully we don't complicate those or confuse those in any way as we move forward. So I appreciate everybody that was there. I think it's nothing but good, and we just need to remind ourselves, I think, at every single meeting, just how important all of those facets are, because it's really not accreditation that we're doing, it's how to make our college better, is what I got out of it. So thank you.
Actually, the summary, the conclusion I got about an organization run by policies and other personalities, Thea Trimble actually planted that idea in my head much earlier. And so I was hearing it from those people the same way. So that proves I either a good listener or else Thea's a smart lady.
Lori, I agree with what John said, and that they focused on some things related to student success issues and the student learning outcomes, which I know you've brought up at several meetings. Seems like, though, during my tenure on the board, our focus has been so heavily on financial matters because of the financial condition that our state was in, that maybe we kind of lost focus of some of these other things, because, quite frankly, I was worried about keeping the doors open to the college. So it's kind of a perfect storm sort of thing that seemed to happen here. But I think a lot of the changes we're making are going to be great for the long haul.
Yeah, I like how she tied everything back, even financially, when we look at our budgets, how we have to understand how every facet of that budget will affect a student, whether or not, whether it's a grant or a program or cuts or increases, however the money comes in, how is it affecting students, and as a board really consider that. So she really hammered that home.
Lori, one thing I got out of it was that I think the board, probably every 2 or 3 years, ought to have that same process, you know, have them back to talk to the board, do a work
I think
session.
somehow we'll get it every year, if it's up to me.
Well, I don't know,
Even if
everybody-
it's a short workshop.
Well, but like
Especially new people, and then a new person, we do go, when we get elected, we go in January, and we don't know how to be a trustee, so that stuff just goes over our heads. So maybe within 6 months or so after that, then you go back again once you understand it, so.
Now, one thing comes to that, Lori, is that we don't get enough data yet now. And I don't think we have the infrastructure or manpower to do it. Or maybe we do, we're not getting it. And so what I can understand, that means that to implement this sort of thing, you're going to have to come up with some way of generating a lot more data.
Well, I think at times we've gotten so much data that we didn't know which ones were more important, because I know at times we'll see how many degrees we're issuing, you know, what does that look like? And sometimes it's so much that I think maybe we miss the key indicators of, are we really getting these students where they need to be? And then sometimes we get none, and I don't, that's kind of just the way I think our system works.
If you have a talented staff, they take all that massive data and put it on a piece of paper so we can understand it.
Yeah, it'd be kind of nice to get that data so we could understand it like we do our financials.
We will. That's exactly what we're working on, is how to bring it together in ways that are not only understandable, but usable for us. Faculty can take complex data and make some meaning of it. Board members and lay folks in the community need to see those success indicators in simpler terms and easier for us to track and monitor, and that's exactly what we're working on.
And a real important piece, and I'm talking to the audience more than ourselves, the real important piece is it's not the board's job to determine it's not the board's job to fix anything. It's not the board, it's the board's job to evaluate whether somebody else is fixing it or somebody else is doing the proper job. It's not our job to do it if they're not.
It's our job to support.
It's probably not even our job to tell them
budgets.
how to do it. It's our job to decide whether they did it.
By looking at the indicators that you understand.
Okay, anybody else? Board member reports? Foundation report, Mr. Reckon.
Well, this is my last COS board meeting, and I'm going to be volunteering with CSET starting in August, running a liaison program with the 3 community colleges that they service, which is COS, Reedley, and Porterville, and helping some of their students, some of their young people, some of their high school students that they work with transition to a community college. So I think that's going to be
Did you say CSET?
CSET.
So we'll keep seeing you.
Community Service
Employment.
Employment and Training. I know we're not supposed to use acronyms. But anyway, so you will be seeing me, and I still be involved with Point Day. And so it may not be my last board meeting, maybe here in another capacity. We had a great fundraiser for the Visalia chapter. Didn't make a lot of money. We made about $12,000. But more importantly, it brought some people into the COS community who had not been involved before. And it was a really fun event that I think only one person got in the pool. And after the betting wasn't out of hand. And the person who won donated the money back to the college, so that was great. So the next event coming up is in September, and I was hoping Larry Dudo would be here. The contract is on my desk. I'm going to wait for the next person to sign it. But we're planning to have an event similar. We like the racing theme, and he has found some people who do pig racing, and they jump over hurdles, and we're going to have it out in the pavilion at the Tulare campus. So I think we'll still have wagering, and I think it'll be a great event. So,
Steve, I thought from the, because I attended it, I thought from the simplicity of it, you raised a lot of money.
Yeah, it was,
Uh,
well, it wasn't so simple from our end, but it was, I'm glad you felt it looked simple.
You're good.
There was a lot of time spent making those boats. So thank you very much.
It was fun.
I loved being here, and I'll be seeing all of you, so.
Thank you, Steve. We'll miss you. We appreciate all of your service to the college and,
Lori, if I may,
sure.
I was, one of the trustees was here when Steve got here. And Steve, as you know, when you got here, this was sort of the leader of this institution. And you and I both know that you did a lot of things to help with that no one will ever know. And your help for this college is greater than most people will ever know, and I thank you for the bottom.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. It sounds like your CSEP role is something that you're going to be very,
Yeah, I have worked with that organization before, and I think it's a great community asset. Let's see, I guess I can say that in this group, I'm looking around. The Obama administration has not been friendly toward, and it's the organization he came from, and so their funding has been cut, and they are not very interested in rural areas or in rural projects, and so I'm taking a position of somebody who was no longer funded.
well, good luck with that. You'll be working with Mary, right?
Yeah,
She's wonderful.
she's great.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Superintendent's report.
I'll just add a couple of things to the report that all of you shared already about the workshop. In addition to the board workshop with Dr. Bino and the accreditation overview, there's just been a number of things we've been working on that have been accreditation related since the spring semester began. And I wanted to touch on them quickly. Since the spring semester ended and the summer session began. First of all, just a reminder that summer school's back in the swing. College of the Sequoias has summer school back on the landscape. We've got about, I think we have a total of 60 classes, and the majority of them are on the Visalia campus, with also a selection of offerings on our Hanford campus. We recently held our 2-day annual Summer Management Council retreat, and the focus of that retreat this year was for all of our classified and certificated administrators to come together and get ourselves calibrated in the work that we've been doing in accreditation. So you've heard a lot about student learning outcomes and the work that we've been doing as an institution to improve our planning, improve our decision making, codify all of those systems. In addition, the non-instructional areas have to work on what's called service area outcomes. And so the same concepts of constant measurement and evaluation for improvement apply to our non-instructional areas, and Management Council spent a couple of days together working on that. We've just wrapped up 2 days with Dr. Conrad, who is back. She's our accreditation consultant. She's been helping us break through on a couple of areas in the development of our resource allocation model and process, which has to tie together with our integrated planning and our governance and decision making. So she's been in meetings with district staff for the last 2 days, including an up till this morning and this afternoon. We have plans now in place as we get ready for, believe it or not, looking forward to the opening of the fall academic semester with an instructional learning institute, which will be a day that faculty all come together and work again with Dr. Pacheco on student learning outcomes. Our convocation this year, which will have accreditation as the centerpiece for it, especially the opportunity for divisions to work together in the afternoon and again spend time on the planning of their curriculum and assessments. And then our first dialogue day, which is set for later on in November, but an opportunity to take time during the year where we stop the world for a moment, bring all of the campus together, academic divisions working with academic divisions, non-instructional divisions working with non-instructional divisions, but all of us paying attention to those outcomes that we've set and marking our progress along the way. We've begun the actual planning now and have a timeline and kind of a grid set up for writing the show cause report. And Dr. Lucerna will be leading that process for us. Dr. Conrad continues to help and guide us in that regard. And Jennifer will be enlisting other staff to help her. all of us at some point or another. So it's coming together as the summer takes shape. It's amazing to us how quickly August will be here, and once August is here, we have really our August board meeting and our September board meeting and our October board meeting, and that show cause report will be due. So in the world of Apollo 13, the Earth is getting pretty big in the window, and we're excited about the progress that we're making so far.
Academic Senate President's report. Dr. Trimble is going to get better at this. I have a hard time not using first names.
I answered a hey you.
I hope not to do that. If I do, hoping the scan will kick me in the teeth.
As most of you know me, Dr. Trimble, and I'm going to be taking over for Michelle Hester Reyes. She has 1 year left on her term, and she's taken a leave, and so I agreed to take over. What you have before you is the Academic Senate year-end report, and I just want to point out that these are Michelle's accomplishments. And the Academic Senate, I've been a senator only for a few months representing the Science Division. One of the things I'd like to point out is the tremendous amount of work that the Curriculum Committee has been doing. You see and approve the curriculum that comes through from the Curriculum Committee, but I think it's easy to forget, since you see it in monthly bites, just exactly how much it adds up to over the term. So 136 course revisions, 71 new courses, 138 deletions, and there's still 187 in the pipeline. There's a lot of work going on. One of the things they've also been working on, which is very important in our future, are the ADT degrees, and that's a new initials here. This is the curriculum, the model curriculum, and it's now the ADTs, which stands, which was, I learned it and then I lost it, Transfer Model Curriculum. This is the associate degrees for transfer. They're pushing so that all of our degrees will meet this requirement. And we have 9 currently approved or in the process of approval. One new wrinkle that just came up within the last month is, even for those that have currently been approved, they have now decided that all of the courses within those degrees must now meet the CID requirements. CID is California's latest and hopefully successful way to have common course numbers for all courses at all levels of higher education. That means that all of these programs and all of the courses within the programs have to go back through the system and get the CID designation. So that is going to be a very important and critical push. And we are under some timelines from the state that they are having requirements that we have to have these things done by a certain time. And the CIDs, I believe, have to be done by the end of next spring. So the Curriculum Committee will continue to be exceedingly busy. The administrators and the faculty that are on the Curriculum Committee, I think, don't sometimes get the recognition that they deserve for just how much they're contributing to the college. It is truly remarkable. Another committee that's been very active, especially recently, are our Outcomes and Assessment Committee members. They have always been working with the learning outcomes and the assessments, but since the show cause, they have really come to the forefront and taken the leadership on and trying to help those of us in our divisions that were lagging behind and providing training for us. They're also implementing the TRACDAT system and the training for the TRACDAT. All divisions have now been trained in TRACDAT. My division went through that training and it was great. Literally after an hour with those people, we could go to our office and do it. It's really, really great. In addition to our normal activity from our committees, which are basically to make recommendations to other committees and to the board, the Academic Senate has also been trying to help in all of our responses to the show cause report. We have organized and co-sponsored the 2 summits, which some of the board members attended. They were very well attended, very successful. Our evaluations from the people who attended were very positive, and we're looking forward to probably making that a more institutionalized event to get people involved, so everyone knows what's going on and everyone feels they have a chance to have an input. In addition, we had the workshops for the learning outcomes with Dr. Pacheco, and the Senate has been having extra meetings, including last Monday. And I think, as far as I know, in the 20-plus years I've been here, that's the first summer meeting the Senate has ever had in order to try and address the needs of getting these things through in a timely fashion so that we can implement them in time for our show cause report. These include things you've already seen, our new planning model, the new governance structure and governance manual, lots of new APs and VPs, which you've also been dealing with. In addition, we have 8 senators and officers who are currently serving on the response task force. And I'd like to commend them because it is a tremendous amount of work. These people still have their full loads. They're still responsible to their divisions for their division meetings. They're responsible to their divisions to be at the Senate meetings. And then they agreed to take on the response task force, which at a minimum, required an additional 2 meetings every week, plus a lot of homework to try and learn and find out the best practices that we can modify to make our college better. So that's what we've been working on. The Academic Senate Executive Committee will be meeting in August to develop our plans for the future, what we're going to try and tackle next year, and we look forward to working with the board.
Thank you, us as well. Yeah, thank you for that report. Do we have a cluster report? Do we have a CSEA report? No, Steve, he's on vacation too, everybody's on vacation. Gasafa?
I'm here, but we have no report, thank
No
you.
report? And you came all this way? Thank you for coming, Mr. Mitchell. Information items, board policies and administrative procedures. Mr. Kearsley.
Okay, this is a first reading of some of the board policies that have come through the process. These are for information only this evening, so I'm just going to draw your attention to them and let you know that we have these here for a first reading tonight. They've been through the board policy revision process, including an opportunity for all the constituency groups to have input, and then they've come through for 2 readings at College Council and have been approved for recommendation to the board. So if you take a quick look at them, Board Policy 3501, which is Campus Security and Access, is one that we've been working on. And you can see by how we've formatted them that anything that's lined through is being recommended for deletion. Anything that's bold is being recommended for addition. And if something is bold and underlined, then it's come through as part of multiple revisions and additions. And mostly what's happening in the Campus Security and Access is we're getting terminology corrected so that we are now not just a single campus, but we are a district, which means we have multiple campuses. And in addition to that, aligning ourselves with changes in regulations in either Title V or federal regulations, which are referenced there, 34 Code of Federal Regulations. And then our next one is course repetition, which is 4225, and this is the repeatability you've been hearing a lot about, and I can speak to it generally. Dr. Lacerna and others can answer specific questions, but you'll see it was kind of a rewrite. There's a big chunk that we had that was course repetition that's been lined through and rewritten, and this is defining how our courses can be offered to students and the limits that students have in being able to take a course and repeat that same course more than once. So a lot of work that we've had to do has been in categorizing, and I don't know the right terminology, Jennifer, but we have the courses now in families, and we've had to rewrite some courses, in fact rewrite many courses, so that they are different enough that they are part of a progression, so that students can take one course and then another course in a progressive sequence of instructional rigor and sophistication, but not just rename the course and give it 3 different levels. So a lot of work has been done to implement this or to prepare this for implementation in a way that we're going to be compliant with the repeatability requirements now in the education code. And then the next one is Administrative Procedure 5055, which is enrollment priority. And again, this is aligning ourselves with changes in the Student Success Act legislation and priority for student enrollment. You can see what's bolded and underlined identifies how students are sequenced for priority enrollment. And granted, we have a number of categories for priority enrollment, and many of these were already in place but have been updated just a little. And then there are some that are actually new, and you can see because they're all bold and they're all underlined and they've been inserted. But for all intent and purposes, this is the priority, the criteria for priority enrollment for students to enroll at College of the Sequoias, becoming increasingly important now, not only because course offerings have been shrunk just a little bit as budget cuts have impacted us, but also because it's now being aligned with and codified with the law in the Student Success Act and the ability for students to enroll based on their successes and based on their continued improvement, as opposed to just being able to re-enroll continuously and maintain their priority for enrollment based on how long they've been at the college or how many units they have completed. So it can't just be who's been here the longest anymore and who has the most units. You have to have progressed toward a specific plan, and you may have a lot of units but not be high priority enrollment anymore.
And they have about the orientation now, right? That's all new?
Correct.
It seems like it's in every single one.
And then the last one, I think, is Administrative Procedure 5070-5070 in Student Services, and this is attendance accounting. And I think this was a very simple change to make sure that we added distance education courses in terms of using the alternative accounting method and making sure they were differentiated from the other types of classes. Is there any additional comments that vice presidents would like to make regarding these? I tried to summarize them quickly, and remember, this is a first reading, so you have time to look at these now, and if you have questions and you'd like to email us those, we'll be happy to answer those and/or suggestions, and we'll bring them back next board meeting for a second reading and adoption.
Any board member questions? No? Okay, we'll move on to the consent calendar. All items listed on the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one motion. An item may be removed from the consent calendar at the request of any board member or any person in the audience and considered on a separate agenda. Does the board want me to read through those items, or is everybody taking a look at it?
We accept the consent calendar.
Okay, then moved. Second, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the consent calendar signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. I vote. Okay, we'll move on to action items. On item number 10, board policies and administrative procedures, second reading.
This is a second and final reading. Hopefully you remember these from last meeting. You've had an opportunity to look at these. The first one, again, policy 2510 is critical. It's significant. We spent a fair amount of time last meeting describing it. Participation in local decision making. This has been revised to clarify the board's role. As you talked earlier about the workshop that you attended, I think this policy now more expressly describes how the board is to interact with the other participatory governance parts of our organization, and in particular, how the board interacts with recommendations that come from either the president or the Senate, and regarding the 10+1 areas, how we have a responsibility in making sure that progress continues there. And then the chapter 3 are under general institution, and these are a series of board policies that we reviewed for you last time in both how we treat human subjects and how we operate our district website. And as a second reading, we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. Otherwise, the staff's recommendation is for adoption of these at second reading.
Do you have any questions? Do you have a motion to approve?
I so move.
We're approving all three.
Approving all three.
I second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion passes. On to item number 11, Air Fund District 1, Mr. Calvin.
Good afternoon. It looks like I've got 5 items, the first 3 of which I will...
12 minutes. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, the first 3, I'll try to work through the first 3 quickly so we can spend some time on the last 2. The first is fairly routine. It's a resolution for interfund district loans. As you know, from time to time, for cash flow reasons, we have the need to transfer between accounts, and once a year we ask for board approval that is forwarded on to the Tulare County Office of Ed, allowing us to do so.
Make a motion to approve resolution 2013-12.
Been moved, do I have a second?
So second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Just a quick question. Brent, do these get, how do they get trued up? In other words, how do they, once a year, do they get put back in the proper fund or as cash flow allows?
As cash flow allows.
There's not a requirement, is there a requirement that it gets put back in a certain time?
We try to pay them back within 3 months of borrowings. And then at the year end, we try to make sure we're square with all the borrowings.
Yeah, typically year end, you're all
We're trued up.
squared up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Megan, can you please poll the board?
Trustee Bumble?
Aye.
Trustee Sherman?
Aye.
Trustee Mann? Trustee Nunez?
Aye.
Mendoza?
Aye.
Okay, item 12 is quickly becoming routine for us as well. Education protection account requirements. Just last month, I brought an EPA requirement to you for the 2012-13 year, and we're doing the same for 13-14. Prop 30, when it passed, designated that certain funds would go into an education protection account, and once a year, we are asked to show publicly to our board as well as on our website how much money we anticipate getting through Prop 30 and then how we're going to spend it. And so if you look at the attached documents, we anticipate getting somewhere in the neighborhood of $6 million in what the governor has designated as education protection account funds, and we will spend those on instructional salaries and benefits. That will also be posted on our website. It's important to note, as I did last month, that $6 million is not new money. And as we'll see here under item 15, new money into the district is about $1.3 million plus some categorical money. So they've essentially taken what was old money and now put a requirement on it that we put it into an EPA account and then designate how it's going to be used. So it's still considered unrestricted, but in a way it is a little bit restricted. But it's paying for things that we would have paid for anyway that we always have. But once a year we need to formally acknowledge how much we're getting and how we're going to use it. And so this meets that requirement.
I move we approve 2013-11.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Megan, can you please poll the board?
Is it Mr. Moore or not?
Yes.
Okay. Trustee Sherman?
Aye.
Trustee Nunez?
Aye.
Trustee Mann? Trustee Bumble?
Aye.
Trustee Mendoza?
Aye. Thank you. Item 13.
13 is also something that we do annually, and that is the renewal of our municipal lease with Valley Business Bank. As you know, for cash flow purposes, we not only keep a municipal lease with VBB, but we also participate in the state-run tax revenue anticipation note program. And having the two sources allows us to pay off one if state funds haven't been received yet. This year is no different. We have about a third of our state apportionment that we will not get until later on this month or even into the fiscal year. So cash is definitely a concern for us. Renewing this lease allows us to just continue short-term borrowing, and we pay that back as the state pays us.
Did that interest rate go up? With Dallas Business
I don't think
Bank?
it was, I think it stayed the same.
I wasn't sure what it was.
It
It's still very
said
low,
it's based on 59% of prime.
but they kept it there, I wasn't sure. if it
Prime's
changed.
been there for a long time.
I move we adopt resolution 2013-13.
And moved by Ken, seconded by Mr. Mann. Please pull the board. That's more helpful. Repeat, sorry. Sometimes I don't know.
Trustee Nunez,
Aye.
trustee Mann, trustee Sherman,
Aye.
trustee Bennett,
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to item 14.
14 is in regards to our bond anticipation notes for the Tulare SFID. We've spent a considerable amount of time talking about this over the last 2 years, had a study session on it this spring. Felt like we had a strategy for paying off the bands with GO bonds this September when the bands came due. Therefore, we put it on as an action item. However, this week we got some of the estimates from our consultants, Dale Scott and Associates, as well as Piper Jaffrey's, and the numbers had changed significantly from what they talked to us at our board study session. I've got a document here to pass out. Before I do, I'd just like to say that we are tabling this issue until the July 8th meeting, so we can bring back a couple of strategies, which we'll discuss here in a moment. And I'd like to just turn this next maybe 5 minutes or so, or however long the board chooses really, into sort of an informational item that we can talk about. But you'll recall, the second sheet in this, you'll recall that our board study session,
Too smooth laughing at the old one.
Dale Scott and Associates walked us through a scenario that would allow us to pay off the $12 million in bond anticipation notes by first taking $4 million we had available in cash, and that is unspent proceeds from the bands from 2 years ago, as well as $2 million in reimbursables from the city of Tulare for work that was done in conjunction with the Tulare campus. And then with that remaining $8 million paid off in GO bonds, and in large measure meet the spirit of AB 182, which will become law in January, which has a number of requirements, including that all CABs, capital appreciation bonds, need to be callable in 10 years, that the interest rate doesn't go above 8%, that the overall debt ratio doesn't exceed 4-to-1, and that the term doesn't exceed 25 years. Because of the situation that our district finds itself in, as we explained in the spring, we couldn't meet every piece of that proposed legislation, but we could meet most of it. And you'll see on that second page where I've noted from the board study session, they kept the interest rate at 5.7. They had a repayment ratio of 4-to-1. And yet they exceeded the 25-year requirement, and it was 32 years. That was in large part what we were planning on bringing back today. The challenge is this week, when they ran the numbers, the interest rate has gone up 70 basis points to, I think, close to 6.4. And when they ran the numbers, clearly, this is a lot different scenario. Rather than paying the $25 million in interest, which was a 4-to-1 ratio, it's gone to about $43 million in interest, or an overall 6-to-1 ratio, which frankly, and I told our consultant this, that's not a lot different than the deal that we voted down, or you voted down 2 springs ago in Dr. Scroggins' final couple of months with us. And so we just told him this, we didn't think this was going to work. And so that's why we've asked to table this and bring back a couple other strategies that would probably involve issuing GO bonds, certainly the current interest bonds, and if callable capital appreciation bonds can work a little bit differently. If we're not issuing that much, we can probably bring them down into the 25-year range, and the overall payback would be substantially less. They were working on that on my drive out here and never did text me back, so I don't have information on that. That's some of the information we'd like to bring back July 8th. At any rate, it does not appear that we're going to be able to issue GO bonds in the full amount of the 8 million plus that we would need. And so we're thinking more along the lines of issuing what we can in GO bonds and then rolling over bond anticipation notes for the remainder, and we can do that for another 3 years. And I realize that's kicking the can down the road, but when faced with this option, we just felt like, and correct me if I'm wrong, I just didn't feel like this was going to be an option that we considered very long.
What would be that amount, Brent, if you had to guess today? I know you're waiting to hear back from them, but what would you say the amount was that we could issue right now and stay within those parameters? What do you think it'll be?
Well, what I told him was we'd really like to see a half. If we could issue $4 million in GO bonds, and have to issue $4 million in bond anticipation notes for 3 years. You know, there are not a lot of options. I don't know that the AVs are going to rise enough in the next 3 years to have a chance of taking even that $4 million off the books with GO bonds. So then we'd be faced with internally figuring out a way to pay it off over time, and then at the end of 3 years, there are other debt instruments like COPs that we've used on other projects that would essentially be our only option.
So if they do the 4 million, is that under the 6-to-1, 7-to-1 proposal?
No, what I told,
Or is that under the 4-to-1 proposal?
what they asked me what our pain threshold was, and
Well, they're really pushing it.
I know
We're hurting now.
what I told them was
Yeah.
what I told them was 4-to-1. I told them that given this scenario, we'd like to see something with half of that 8 paid through GO bond. That we didn't want to exceed the 4-to-1 payback. Didn't know if we could do that, and I was hoping to get a text message from him just so I could answer that question a little more intelligently. But
Do we only use them, or are we able to, I mean, and I'm not questioning them per se here, I'm just saying, is that the way you typically do it? You go with one company and you don't go out to others? Or do you
well, that's a
just-
great question, and believe me, over the last day and a half, we've asked that question of ourselves a few times. There are essentially 2 large players in this market. One is Piper Jaffray, and one is RBC. And we have a relationship with RBC by virtue of our TRANS, the tax revenue anticipation notes. We work with them, and have talked a little bit over the years about this dilemma that we're in. The challenge is as frustrating as it is, and believe me, I don't know that anybody's sicker than me besides maybe you of dealing with this issue of trying to clean it up, because for 2 years I've been struggling with it. The challenge is the numbers are the numbers, and while I'm very irritated that we were shown one scenario in the spring and it changes now, and I understand interest rates have risen and so forth, but I'm irritated. I'm just not sure that RBC, maybe they would have communicated a little bit better, but they couldn't change the numbers. The numbers are the numbers. And to their credit, Piper Jaffray and Dale Scott, as well as our bond attorney, David Casanoka, attended a meeting with Tulare County with me, just because we just wanted to vet out a couple issues that we've heard in terms of how they're taking money back for a reserve, how they're funding their reserve and so forth. And we did look into that, and that's not an issue that's going to have a significant effect on this. They do have a higher reserve than most places, but our bond attorney, through that research, doesn't feel like that's gonna stop us. We can issue up to $25 per $100,000 assessed, just to pay back the principal and interest, not counting what the county does on top of that for their reserve. So that was good news. We worked that out through that process with the county. And the challenge is last year, the last couple of years maybe, there has been a little more room that we could have, between what we were charging or charging taxpayers and the $25. The challenge is in the 14-15 year, it goes up to, by virtue of the bonds that we issued several years ago, it goes up to $23, $24 per $100,000 assessed year after next. So there's just not much room to put anything else in there. We've got a little bit of room for some current interest bonds, but not a lot. And there's nothing about any consultant that could change that.
Part of the problem you have with the bonds is this is so small dollar amount for those guys. Not too many of them are that interested in that small. I mean, these guys typically deal in $50, $100 million bonds, and you're talking an $8 million bond, so you don't have a whole lot of interest in it from that standpoint. You know. And the other thing happened today is interest rates jumped another 35 basis points today. And so, you know, they're not even gonna be able to give us what they said they were gonna give us, because we're not locked in, so it's gonna even cost us more, whatever they do for it.
I made that comment to Brent at lunch today when we were agonizing over this. I said, the thing that bothers me the most is, you know, by the time we bring something back to the board on July 8th, interest rates are gonna be up again.
You know, they're already up today,
Yeah, they jumped today by virtue of the.
35 basis points today, based on Bernanke's comments today, so.
Well, you know, this is way out of my expertise, so what I'm about to say may be totally off base. But ever since we started this process, very little of what we've been told turns out to be true. Do we need to maybe talk to somebody else?
I think,
The numbers may be the numbers, but I sure like to talk to somebody that guesses better, unless you tell me that's not true.
No, again, we've had that same conversation today. The challenge is, from a timing standpoint, we are up against the wall with a September 1st due date on the ban.
Maybe some smart guys say, you better take 6 to 1 or it's gonna be 14 to 1. I don't know.
You know, it's hard to swallow 6 to 1 or even 4 to 1 when you figure a mortgage you're borrowing today is 2 to 1 over 30 years. So, and they talk about a 5 or 6% interest rate. I don't know how they calculate it, because you're getting a 4% interest rate on a mortgage, and it's 4 to 1, and so, and here you're getting 2 to 1, and now they're saying 4 to 1 or 6 to 1. I mean, to me, that calculates.
Right. I know you understand it. It's because the
Because
actions.
you're pushing it way out.
Yeah, the actions our district took 2, 3, 4 years ago, we pushed things out 25, 30, 35 years. And we have this cap of $25 per $100,000 assessed. So we can't begin paying a mortgage. You get a mortgage and you're making a payment that very next month. Not the case here. We may not make a payment on this for 20 years before it starts stacking up and we start paying it off.
And that's what we're trying to avoid.
Well, yeah, but it's kind of too late to avoid it. I mean, we're in it. I mean, we've been in it for several years now. That's.
Well, I think we gotta borrow the $4 million or whatever, and then try to roll the other over for 3 years or whatever it is, and then hopefully property values have shot up, or we use the $2.5 million from the sale of our farm property or whatever to.
We talked about all of those strategies today. At least getting what we can in the bond now, Greg, and rolling the rest over for another couple of years gives us time to try to pay down that last $4 million.
Right.
Maybe our budget committee, which is Ken and Greg, needs to get together with y'all, and it could be that we need to act now. I don't know, but I hate to find out in September we should have acted now, and, you know, maybe you guys, maybe you need to come with a strategy. and skip the board meeting schedules. And if we have to have a special board meeting, we have to.
We can do that.
And we went 4-1 to 6-1, what's next? 12-1?
Right.
Yeah, we can meet next week, or you
Yeah.
just call it, as long as we have time to post this.
You guys are echoing the conversation Brent and I had today, and exactly what I told Brent is, let's get our 2 board member committee together. Let's review this, let's take a look at what we need to do. And if we need to act before July the 8th, because time is of the essence, then we would ask you all to get together for
Can we
special.
borrow on the land in Tulare?
On the undeveloped portion?
Yeah. And we might be able to borrow enough money at 5% and heck with it. I mean, that's something to look at.
Well, yeah, I think that would be a good subcommittee conversation, because if we can lock in at a 5%, that's better than all of this.
Especially since the payments could start now,
Right,
instead of letting the interest mount up forever.
Well, I think
Yeah,
the problem
the question is where the
is
payments
how
are
the
coming
payment's
from.
gonna come from. Now, if we borrow against the land, they're not gonna come from the Tulare tax.
that's right.
They're
You're gonna have to look at your general fund.
Which is essentially like, again, worst case is, this gets to the end of the next 3 years.
It's like our COPs, right?
Exactly. It's very, we can look at any debt instrument at the end of 3 years, but it comes out of general fund.
Tulare folks ought to pay it, but not if it breaks us. So, I mean, everything's on the table, I think.
Well, in that reauthorization of the bond, the election in 14, I mean, we need to go back and look at everything. And maybe we're reauthorizing just the remaining $4 million, because we can get what we can in the current bond. So,
Or maybe what we're authorizing is the $4 million to pay back the land loan that we just borrowed to pay off the stupid stuff that we're getting ourselves into. I don't know, but we can get together if you want.
yeah, the subcommittee, Nunes and Sherman will get you guys in. I think John's suggestion is the right one. And if we need a special meeting, we'll notify the board president and we'll work on that.
Something else to really, is the press here? Another possibility is, nobody wants to sell some land down there. Maybe we ought to give the Tulare voters an option. We'll sell the land and pay this thing off, or they can come up with another bond. I don't know. That's not very popular, I'm sure, a lot of folks, but it's an option.
Yeah, good luck, we'll take you with.
Hey, I'm not up for reelection in Tulare.
You have friends in Tulare.
Your name's on a park.
Barbara Bino,
I share the name with someone who did.
Barbara Bino on Monday talked about how this is, an issue throughout the state, and I would think that somehow the creativity and tools have been used, so I'm suggesting we look at to see what other people are doing, because I think people are in a lot bigger trouble than us.
One thing I failed to mention is in the proposed legislation, AB 182, there is a provision that they've added because of districts in the same situation that we are, which would allow a one-time waiver. This is once the proposed law becomes law, there's a one-time waiver that you request through the chancellor's office that would allow a district to exceed one or more of those parameters I discussed earlier.
You were going where I was anyway. What's wrong with us trying to get somebody to carry a bill for us? Some kind of a bill to enable us to, maybe it deals with when the assessed value goes down, you get to go over $25. I don't know why.
So let's pick the one that's most strategic, that will give us a waiver.
What's wrong with going 2 directions at once and maybe considering some legislative relief? Everybody else doesn't.
Thanks, Brian. Okay, so
What
we're all up for a
happens
special
if we
meeting.
default on it?
So, I'm sorry, Greg, what was your
What happens
question?
if we default on that?
Well, heaven forbid.
On
The one we're trying to pay off?
The anticipation of
Yeah. No, not the anticipation, but, our short-term,
this September?
the thing we're trying to pay off.
Yeah, it's bond
it. It's the bond anticipation.
Yeah, I forget I said that.
We'll lease out the Tulare Center, like the college in LA, is that what she told us?
Yeah.
I think that's worst case scenario that could happen.
So can I just raise a point of order, Madam President? This item was agendized for action, and what our recommendation to you as a board is that we table this item, and we need a motion, a second, and a vote to table it.
I move that we table this matter.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ken, seconded by Greg to table our bond authorization issuance resolution, which is 2013-14. Any further comments? And this is a roll call vote, correct?
It's not a
For table?
resolution.
So no, just for table.
Correct.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion for table. Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
I'm
It's,
assuming you all have the budget book. Do I need to step on it a little bit? You all
20
have
minutes.
the budget book. And rather than go through that page by page, I would encourage anyone that has questions on that to let me know, email, call, whatever. But I thought what we do this year is try to digest this down into a form that you become used to looking at, which is what I just passed out, which is the fiscal solvency format. And do I have to put it?
I just. You might have to put it on your binder or something.
So here's some of the assumptions that we've made. Again, it's very similar to what we showed you the day or two before the May revise came out, with one notable exception, and it's right here. We got one curveball, and that is that what we show you here is all unrestricted funds. In this document, it's all unrestricted funds, and yet the governor chose to take out what was going to be unrestricted funds and give us an extra $50 million here in this student success field matriculation program, which involves counseling and assessment, orientation, and that money will certainly be put to good use at COS. We have not gotten enough information as to how it's going to be given to us, whether it'll be based on proportion of FTS, whether it's on some kind of program by program basis, but it's our estimate that of that $50 million in new money, that we'll get somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 to $500,000. The challenge with that is in this you'll have to probably consult your sheet on this, but you'll see that whereas in 13-14 we had proposed at the last board meeting a structural deficit of virtually nothing, maybe it was a $12,000 structural deficit. We're now showing a $467,000 structural deficit because our revenue up here isn't what we anticipated, because we had thrown it all into unrestricted general fund revenue, and again, it didn't come out that way. And so in the end, I think some of these expenses that have to do with counseling and assessment, things that we used to pay for out of matric dollars, but that went away and we had to backfill because of it. It's our position that the new matric dollars can take those costs back over again. And so we still think we're going to be very, very close to even next year. I want to note that this includes all the technology costs, all the COP costs, the things that we've been paying out of the Visalia bond as allowable costs, but nevertheless, we've been paying them out of one-time money for several years. We've gotten all those back into the budget, which I know was very important to the board. And so, even though we're still showing a little structural deficit here, we think the matric dollars will take a big chunk of that out, and B, that's an all-inclusive number. The other thing is, as in previous programs, we show all the increases to the budget on an ongoing basis, and yet we don't adjust our revenue. We don't try to anticipate extra revenue coming into the system. Basically, we try to load up the expenses we think we'll see, but we're conservative on the revenue side. And if all indications that we're getting now from the state are correct, we may in fact see some additional revenue in the next couple of years. But I want to emphasize we're not counting on it at this point. The other thing also to note is that as in every budget we've ever done, we anticipate that there will be some budget fallout. So as last year, we anticipated in our budget having a structural deficit. It didn't actually come to fruition. Number one, because we got some Prop 30 funds, but also because we had some fund balance dropout at the end of the year, and we didn't touch our reserve for the year. So while I don't like seeing this structural deficit on here, I think there are some reasons to believe that we will not run at a structural deficit next year. However, if in fact all those numbers held true, we did extrapolate it out to the effect it would have on our different funds. You see that the OPEB gained $500,000 this year in interest. We just bring that down. We can't anticipate what the interest will bring, but we're not hitting that. The Visalia bond would be spent down to about half its current level. We would spend this one-time revenue that we've been looking at for several years now. It was $996,000. That was the indirect costs from grants that we basically just pooled together. And for several years now, we thought we'd have to use it to make our budget meet, and we just haven't. That's good news. Again, we're using it as a place filler here with the hope that we won't need it there either. But in the case we did spend it, we would still be $700,000 over 5% general fund reserve. And that's not counting the funds out here, the $1.4 million and the 1.2 million and the 2.4 million in the farm reserve and the Linwood reserve from the sale of the farm.
OPEB, did we not contribute to it this last year?
We did not contribute to it, with the exception of interest earned. $400,000 or $500,000 in interest earned, but we did not set it up as a budget item and contribute to it.
Okay, and I know that we're gonna have soon. I mean, what would you estimate, or what was that number if we were to contribute to it to keep it where we?
We're probably about halfway there, is it, 11
Yeah, we have
million?
13, it's a 13, or the actuarial that just came out, it's a $13 million liability. And we have the 5 million in it. We have 5 million.
Should they put a yearly number on that in order to at least keep pace with like a year? Is there a
Annual
year number?
contribution, recommended annual
We pay
contribution.
as you go, so it's $1.7 million, I think, $1 million. It's either $1.5 million that we pay every year, not to the trust.
Right.
We just pay as you go.
For the expense, but if you were in a good enough position to pay as you go your expense and contribute to the trust to get to the $11 million, do they give us a recommended annual stroke on that additional contribution?
Yeah, it's our ARC. I'm trying to think what the number was.
That's okay, but there is a number.
Yes.
Okay, so the $1.5 million comes out of general fund, and that is just money we didn't have to take out of here. We're paying as we go, and then you want to get that to 11
Yeah, in
million
fact,
to
I
be
think our
self-funded.
new ARC,
But we didn't have to drop down on that just to make our annual payment.
our new ARC that just came out in our study, I think is a little bit higher than our pay-as-you-go. It's the first time that our ARC is higher than our pay-as-you-go.
Because they're
So
anticipating
it's gonna
costs
be
going
reported
up.
now on our balance sheets because that difference.
Well, I would think as healthcare continues to rise, that number is going to continue to go up. This is one I think we need to really watch because it might come back to bite us like the bonds. You know, we're being told this is enough, and in 2 years they might say, oh yeah, it's not 11 million, it's 20. I just think we need to be real careful in making sure we keep an eye on that one.
The next few slides you've seen before. I'd be happy to spend some time on it, but in interest of time, essentially it's just our strategy for ramping up our FTS generation for the 13-14 year in order to claim the mid-size college threshold and the $1.1 million for 3 years that goes with it. I think you're aware of that strategy. We have a plan for increasing fall of 13, spring of 14, and then squeezing both centers excuse me, both summers into the 13-14 year in order to make that number. These are some required slides that Lyndon and Leangela have added, and I do want to thank Lyndon and Leangela for all their hard work in putting this presentation together, as well as the budget book. They and their staff did a fantastic job of putting this together. The summary budget of other funds in terms of expenses that we see in these areas, or even revenue. If we generate revenue in these areas, then we include an equal expense to zero them out. Again, I want to emphasize that our fiscal department every year is audited quite extensively, and as I mentioned the other day off the cuff during Dr. Bino's presentation, while there are districts that have multiple audit exceptions every single year, and some of them reoccurring and ongoing, we've had one in the last 7 or 8 years. And that was one that virtually all districts had. It was the way people were scheduling classes on a to-be announced basis, and everybody got an audit exception for that, and we had ours changed up for the subsequent semester. So our fiscal department does an outstanding job of keeping us clean with state regulators and our auditors. Any questions that I can answer for you?
I move we approve the tentative budget.
Have a second?
Second.
Moved by Greg, seconded by Ken. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Tentative budget adopted.
And thank you very much.
Okay, item number 16. Mr. Middlesmith. Let's save the best for that.
Am I last? I thought there was one other item.
Close to the line. I think they put those two in there just to make you feel better.
Well, this is the annual 5-year plan that we turn into the Chancellor's office every year. It's a mandatory plan. It is a summary of what we've been doing and what we will do. Many of the projects that are on the list, you all know is completed, they're constructed, they're occupied. But from a plan standpoint, there are many steps that we have to go through before we close them. Stuff with the Division of State Architects, stuff with the Chancellor's office as far as claims and reimbursements, so they stay on the plan for a couple of years. We're not turning in any final project proposals this year. We're submitting a couple of initial project proposals that were actually initial project proposals from before. Probably the biggest items to note if we recap what was last year, we still have 2 projects in the funding queue that are approved as of this point. The Tulare Center Phase 2 project and the Basic Skills Center at the Visalia campus. Right now in that queue, if there's a 2014 bond, we're in line for about $51.5 million, which is a good thing. So we felt that that was adequate enough, knowing that we're still not out of the woods whether there's going to be a state bond. There's also another potential step in the approval process, which is because the bond hasn't been solidified yet, a number hasn't been solidified, and we're in the approval queue based on an overall need of the system in 2014 of $1.5 billion. So if there is a bond and the number is set lower than that, then they'll start going to the scores. And we didn't score as well as we had liked, because remember we had to withdraw our local contributions from Tulare based on our fiscal issues in Tulare. So we're not out of the woods yet, but we're in the queue for those 2 final project proposals for last year. We also felt that we didn't need to put in a final proposal this year. As I mentioned, we downgraded the Kern building modernization, a $15 million project, to an initial proposal, which we would submit a final for next year. Also in the plan, the other project it's kind of in a neutral mode, is the renovation of what we're now calling the, not Child Development Center, but by its formal name, the Live Oak Building. because we know that we're gonna renovate it, we just don't know what we're gonna renovate it to. So we kind of have a placeholder there until a decision is made of how we're gonna renovate that. So it's in the plan, but it's not a commitment from the district as far as of this point. Knowing we're in the interest of time, I'd like to turn it over for any questions, if you have any questions on any specific projects, or request approval of the 5-year plan.
So on the Live Oak building, you may have just said that and I didn't hear it the way I needed to understand it. You've submitted something to the state, but it doesn't get.
The 5-year plan is really made up of projects that we're asking the state for money, but also our intent to build. If we're not asking them for money, we're pretty much reporting what our plans are today.
Okay.
It's not a commitment, our plans can change tomorrow. And so what we know is, and even the cost, right now it's costed out when we made an estimate to put it back as a child development center, because that's what we know today. If tomorrow you say build an administration building out of it, we'll recost it, it would still be a renovation, and then we would start working on more of a schedule. So it's just kind of a placeholder, but since we're not looking for state money for it, it's more of a placeholder, and there's a lot more discretion.
Any further questions of Eric? No? Okay, so we have anything to vote on?
Will the state allow us to do anything else with that building other than?
I didn't want to broach the question too much with them, Earl, because when we first talked to them about demolishing it, they raised their hand up and said, no, 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 we still own that building. So I really wanted to wait until we knew what we wanted to do and then take somebody out to dinner and kind of address it with them in a really roundabout way. And also discuss potential options of begging for forgiveness versus permission. Because sometimes I'm afraid of what they may tell us. But what we do know is it was a state-funded building. It was part of a 30-year bond. That bond has not paid off yet. And so technically it's still theirs. So that's what we know. So I really wanted to wait for the decision, because our decision may be put it back to the Child Development Center, then we don't have to have that conversation.
Okay, any other questions of Eric? Do I have a motion to approve the 2015 through 2019 5-year construction plan?
So moved.
Moved by Earl, do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ken.
Where do you think?
Anticipation. She wants some more candy. So moved and seconded, any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the plan signify by saying aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Item 17, Dr. Lucerna.
Okay, 30 seconds, curriculum report.
Give you a minute.
I get a minute. And as Dr. Trimble mentioned, we've pushed about 450 courses through this year, and that's over half of our courses. So the first 4 pages are, as you're used to now, repeatability or 5-year review. I do want to point out on page 4, the last course is called Leadership Development. This is a course that we're bringing forward due to repeatability, and we're asking for provisional approval. I apparently have a magic wand that allows me to, with your approval, authorize this course for 1 semester only, because it has not gone through the full curriculum process, but it will do so in the fall. And it was because of repeatability, and it's our course that's required for our associated student body. Students have to take this course, and we didn't know exactly what we were going to do with it and how we were going to rewrite this until about a month ago, so it didn't get through the process. So we're asking for provisional authorization. Page 5, there's 2 course deletions, and then that starts the new degrees and degree modifications. And I did want to point out on page 7 that the ADT degrees, which are the transfer model curriculum, we're approving 2 of those tonight as well.
How many of those total are there? Is this like an overwhelming task on this ADT, or I don't quite grab the whole concept?
We have, I think, 3 approved right now, and we're going to have 9 by next year. And we're supposed to have, I think, a total of 12 for our campus, but it's based on the number of, they have a list of the type, the state has a list of the ADTs that are available, And any colleges that have those degrees at their college are supposed to create those. Like Dr. Trimble mentioned, one of the problems is we've submitted some and other colleges have submitted some not knowing we needed the course IDs approved first. So we're having to go back and approve course IDs. There's a couple of those in there. But at the end, we should have 12 at the end, and we're in process on 9.
And that'll be all we'll have
That-
total.
It depends, because other programs could decide to do that, or they're in the process of still adding more. I think they added 3 this year, so I think Spanish was added this year, and maybe, I can't remember what the other ones are, but as the state adds more, then we'll have the option
So
to
we're
do
on
more of
task
those.
with what they're requiring of us.
We are right now,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll be awfully close when we finish the
This-
remaining 6 and we end up with our total of 9.
With our 9, we will be.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions of Dr. Lasoya? Do you have a motion to approve curriculum?
Move the curriculum new modified deleted be approved as presented in item 17.
No, second.
Moved by John, seconded by Greg. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item 18. Mr. Carrizosa.
As reviewed with the board in the closed session, this is a recommendation from staff after having processed an incident of student discipline on our campus for a recommended action that the district and the board of trustees expel student case number 2013-01 and student identification at 00316335. Recommendation is for expulsion.
So moved. Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Greg. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Recommended student expulsion passes. And I just have one final funny item that I want to bring up before we close. That was my email from Larry. Under the farm expenses, there was one that said dead horse purchase. We just want to make sure as board members, which nobody caught that, but me, because I looked at the farm expenses that we weren't buying a dead horse.
So what was it?
We've already bought them.
When you borrow the horses, if one dies, then you're liable for paying for it, which does happen, and they borrow these horses for their classes, and one died, so they're reimbursing. But it
For the
says on their, it
purchase of
says
that
on
dead
their
horse.
dead horse purchase. So you wanted to make sure we all knew that we didn't purchase it.
So we need to carry our,
Oh, nice.
Why a little closer so we don't see dead animals being purchased on your,
no, but we need to carry these to the next meeting?
oh, do we need to bring them over?
We will box up our stuff and take it for you when we leave here right now.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everyone.